I'm Jeremy Hobson. This is the follow-up from the middle, where we follow up and bring more of your voices into the conversation each week on a new topic. Today, we are following up on our show about concerns about election integrity heading into the upcoming midterm elections, concerns that have been raised by both Democrats and Republicans. Now, as you can see, if you're watching, I am in Wisconsin, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin at WUWM, and I am joined for the follow-up by WisPolitics Editor JR Ross, who is in the studio with me. JR, welcome to the follow-up.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So we talked a lot on the show about redistricting, first of all, and a lot has happened all across the country in states that are trying to redraw their maps to benefit the party in power in those states ahead of the elections. There was a decision actually after we did our live show from the Virginia Supreme Court, which struck down the new maps in Virginia that had just been approved by voter referendum. That was seen as a win for Republicans, bad for the Democrats. How is the redistricting fight playing out here in Wisconsin, if at all?
It's been punted to 2028. The reason why I say that is there were a series of court actions filed in Wisconsin seeking new maps by Democrats. There's this real quirk in Wisconsin state law. Republicans back in 2011 had complete control of the Capitol. They approved new maps that were very good for them, and then drew up this plan that if there was a challenge to a map, you had to appoint a 3-judge panel that would hear that lawsuit. Then it could be appealed to the state Supreme Court. The thinking back then was that they were better off to have a redistricting case heard in the state Supreme Court, which had a conservative majority back then. Well, that law had never been used until this year. 2 lawsuits filed. The state Supreme Court now has a liberal majority. They appointed 3-judge panels. They looked at these cases and said, we basically can't do anything with them because the old conservative majority of the Supreme Court had said you can't do a partisan redistricting gerrymandering case, period. That's not justiciable. I hate saying that word. But anyway, you can't do it in Wisconsin. So they punted back. The Supreme Court said, hey, we can't do anything with these cases because of the old standard. You guys take this now and figure it out. So we're looking at 2028. One of 2 things are going to happen. Either the liberal majority, which go to 5-2 come August, will probably draw a new map. That's the going wisdom in the Capitol. Or if Democrats win a trifecta of both houses of the legislature and the governor's office, they'll draw a new map, probably a 6-2-1 for Democrats.
And right now, remind us what it is right now in terms of the split between Democrats and Republicans in the House of Representatives from Wisconsin.
It's 6-2 Republicans.
Okay.
And the map really isn't a partisan gerrymander in Wisconsin. It was an incumbent protection plan. So you go back to 2011, which I know is ancient history, but that's the basis for this map we have right now. And you had people in power who basically agreed how to make everybody happy in the delegation. So Paul Ryan, former House Speaker.
Right, came from Wisconsin.
From Janesville. His chief of staff testified in a lawsuit 15 years ago. He went to each member of the delegation, okay, what do you want? And like Tammy Baldwin, now a member of the U.S. Senate, said, I want my district to be compact enough I can drive all over in a day. Reed Ribble, Republican up from like the Green Bay area, said, well, I've got this house, like lake house down here. If you add that county in my district, I'd be really happy.
Then I can go stay at my lake house more often.
Yeah.
Right?
Now, Sean Duffy, who was a brand new lawmaker.
Who's now the Secretary of Transportation.
He did say, hey, we make my district a little more Republican because that seat had been in Dem hands for 40 years before that with Dave Obey. So there was some partisanship, but for the most part, it was making the incumbents happy. That map then was a foundation for the latest lines because in 2022, the state Supreme Court, again, with an old conservative majority, said, hey, you guys can't agree, Governor Evers, Democrat, Republican lawmakers, so we're going to take maps from all you guys, you submit proposals. You have to take a least change approach to the maps drawn in 2011 by Republicans. That in our minds is fair. So it's an Evers drawn map with a Republican foundation. That's where we're at right now with our map of Wisconsin.
You're also reminding me just how many people come out of the state of Wisconsin and become big national figures, too.
They are battle-tested in Wisconsin.
Yeah, right. If you can make it here. One thing that Wisconsin is doing is kind of interesting that gets to the questions that came up in our show is voter ID. This is a big question. Should there be voter ID across the entire country, which there's not right now. But in the state of Wisconsin, you do need a photo ID in order to vote.
It's been that way for about 15 years. Republicans began pushing it in the mid-2000s. Democratic Governor Jim Doyle at the time kind of rebuffed those. Once they got that trifecta in 2011, they passed it. There were a series of lawsuits that were filed to challenge it. Went to the U.S. Supreme Court, upheld it. There is like a provision, though, if you don't have a birth certificate, you're born at home, for example, you could go to the DMV and present enough documents to get like a receipt because you don't have a photo ID. Now, in talking to Democrats in general, they're not real happy with the law. They found a way to live with it. Essentially, it's more effort in the front end of, okay, here are our voters over here. How do we make sure they have a voter ID? If they don't, can we get them to the DMV? What are the hours for the local branch? So it's more effort in the front end, but it's not really shown to have a huge influence in terms of like turnout. I mean, we had 3-some million people turn out in 2024 for the presidential race. So I'm sure there's some people on the margins who definitely were impacted by it. But for the most part, I figured out how to live with it and kind of carry on.
Yeah, just bringing up the idea of the DMV and the hours at the DMV reminds me that I still have not been able to find a time to get a real ID yet, and I'm using my global entry card when I get on planes because it's like, oh, a month and a half from now, I can finally make an appointment at the DMV for that.
It's really in rural areas where you see the biggest impact of like when they've cut back hours or availability for DMV offices because there are just fewer people living out there.
Yeah. Let's listen to one of our callers. We asked if they had confidence in the integrity of the midterm elections. Listen to this.
My name is Jenny, and I'm from Kansas. I work as election worker, and I'm a little nervous this year. I'm usually a supervising judge, so I run a polling location, and I'm a little bit nervous about what that's going to look like, if ICE is going to be there. I've never worried about the integrity of the election, especially having worked the last 8 elections. I'm just nervous about the federal government coming in and telling Kansas and different jurisdictions how to run their elections, and thus putting that all into question.
JR, what do you think about that? And is there question about whether federal agents, ICE agents, or troops or anything is going to be at the polls here in Wisconsin come November?
Yeah, well, we do have some numbers in polling. The Marquette University Law School poll is kind of the gold standard in Wisconsin. They ask about election integrity, and so far we're seeing mostly it's a Republican issue of they're not sure they're going to trust the results. But we're seeing a little uptick from Democrats, independents of what she's talking about, worries about Donald Trump. What is Trump going to do? What could he possibly do to mess with the elections in Wisconsin? We are just now seeing reports of the FBI and interviewing people talking about 2020. Whether Donald Trump says about Wisconsin in 2020 did not win the state. You can debate how the election was run, but the rules in place at the time, Joe Biden won. There's been an audit ordered by Republican lawmakers, by nonpartisan legislative arm. Yeah. There was an audit by a conservative group. I mean, we have not seen any evidence of widespread fraud. Again, you can talk about how things were done. Absentee ballots, you have to sign the outside of it and have a witness. If that witness was missing certain information, they still counted the ballot in 2020. Was that the right thing to do? I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to make that call. But there's a policy debate there. But in terms of like fraud, there wasn't widespread fraud in Wisconsin. At the same time, Republicans have really kind of bought into Trump's claims of there was something wrong in nursing homes or whatnot. And so there are definitely issues that we could do things better in Wisconsin. But as far as like an administrative problem, not right now. But yeah, people are worried.
Well, and this caller that we're going to listen to actually is more representative of most of the people that we heard from, including election judges and election officials who believe that elections are run very well in this country and they have confidence. Listen.
My name is Ty Garner. I'm calling from Arvada, Colorado. I am absolutely confident that our elections are safe and done in a way that is both bipartisan and legal. I think for anybody who is questioning the integrity of our elections, I would encourage them to be an election judge. In the past years, I've worked for every election cycle as an election judge, and just getting to see the process in our state, in Colorado especially, and learn about the processes in other states as well. There's so many systems in place that protect our elections and the way that people vote, where the ballots go, how they're counted. Everything that we do, we have to have a bipartisan member with us. So myself as a Democrat, I always had to have a Republican, a registered Republican with me at all times with everything that was being done, whether we were processing ballots, helping people to a ballot box, working at one of the election precinct centers. All of that work has to be done with integrity.
JR, is that the kind of thing that you hear from people here? Do people have confidence mostly that the election will be run well?
Some. One of the problems is we keep having bad looks in Wisconsin.
What does that mean?
In Madison, for example, second largest city in the state, there was a problem this spring with 23 absentee ballots that arrived at the clerk's office in time but weren't taken to the polling site by the deadline to be counted. We had an issue in Madison in November where the clerk just lost track of 193 ballots. Now, after you go through this process in Wisconsin where you cast the ballots, you go through this canvas, it's then certified. They kind of discovered them before they could have said something and didn't. To the Elections Commission, the state body found out what was going on and kind of raised a red flag. But those are not great looks if you want to tell people that things are going great. So now we have a lawsuit pending about these 23 ballots. Like, should we have counted them in Wisconsin? Because the state law here is your absentee ballot must be in by 8 o'clock on election day at the polling site. Now, some of these are different. So Milwaukee, for example, uses called central count. All absentee ballots go to one place. They count them all in one spot in one shot. In Madison, they take the ballots from the clerk's office that are mailed in or delivered in person and take them out to the polling site and have them counted there. These ballots they arrived by Monday before the election. The clerk's staff, they'll get them there by 8 o'clock on Tuesday, somewhere like 8:05. And so is that should they have been counted? Again, there's this debate legally about would that fit the definition of the 8 p.m. deadline to be counted in Wisconsin law.
Yeah, I saw that there was a story on your website, WisPolitics, about a couple people that are suing because their ballots, I guess, didn't get there in time.
Well, it's a great question in administration elections. If the clerks make a mistake, if the officials make a mistake, who should be penalized? Here, the voters are being penalized because they did everything right. It was in by Monday, no problem there. The clerk messed up. So again, whose fault should that be? Who should be penalized? And even the Democratic chair of the Elections Commission, the state agency, said, I don't really like this. I hope somebody sues and the court says, it's not the voter's fault. We're not going to penalize the voter for a clerk's mistake.
All right, well, stand by because in a minute we're going to talk more about Wisconsin politics and find out what voters are thinking about ahead of the midterm elections. We'll be right back with JR Ross from WisPolitics. Welcome back to The Follow-Up. I'm Jeremy Hobson. I'm joined by WisPolitics Editor JR Ross. JR, give us the lay of the land for the elections coming up in November. What are the biggest issues for Wisconsin voters?
Well, if you look at that Marquette poll, it's like anywhere else. It's the cost of living. That's driving almost everything. Now, if you look at partisanship, for a lot of Republicans, it's illegal immigration. But the overall pie is basically, what's my tax bill? How's my job doing? Can I afford things paycheck to paycheck? Am I getting ahead at all? Am I falling behind? And gas prices are not helping. I've talked to a number of Republicans in recent weeks who've told me flat out, if gas prices are $4, $4.50 come fall, it's going to be a tough night for Republicans in Wisconsin because Donald Trump promised us, if I get in the office, your gas prices will go down. And they did. But now they're up. The question is, when do they have to start going down, people to feel like better about themselves? And I've heard this argument of, well, it's Labor Day. Voters tune in come Labor Day because they're done with their summer vacation. If it's done by Labor Day, we'll be okay for Republicans. Maybe it's July 4th. They're going, okay, we're doing our vacation. I paid more for gas. That's going to make me unhappy. Or is it Memorial Day? At some point, you can't tell people that things are getting better. They have to feel that things are getting better.
And look, you and I have been through enough times when gas prices went up to know that they do not come down quickly. Yeah. They never do. Yeah.
And so if you add that plus Donald Trump's numbers, it's not a great look right now for Republicans. I mean, Trump in the last Marquette poll was at an all-time low for net favorability or net positivity for his job approval rating. In 2018, Donald Trump was at 45% roughly, the last Marquette poll for the election in October. Tony Evers, a Democrat, won the governor's office by 1.1 percentage point over Scott Walker, Republican incumbent. So if Trump's at like 44, 45% come mid-October, Republicans could be okay. If he's at 35, 33 or lower, it is not going to be a good night for Republicans in Wisconsin.
And what's he at now?
He's like in the mid-30s, mid-upper 30s.
Yeah. There is a governor's race this November.
Yep. Governor's race, all constitutional offices, and control the state legislature. Republicans drew that map back in 2011. That was a foundation for the latest map, right? State Supreme Court threw out that map in 2023 with a liberal majority. We have new lines that create a path for Democrats to win back to the legislature. They haven't had control of the assembly except for 2 years in the last, trying to do math in my head, 30-some years.
Wow.
So this is their one chance, or the best chance in decades to get back to majority. Governor's office is a big one because we've got the 2020 presidential election. And so whoever controls the legislature could dictate some of the rules, how that election runs in Wisconsin. And we are always on the razor's edge, the presidential race.
All right, let's get to another caller talking about how voters around the country are feeling ahead of the election. Listen to this.
My name is Tim Jones. I am from Texas. I think concerns about the integrity of the election are valid. I think it's a valid concern. Here in Central Texas, the Secretary of State has dragged their feet on implementing new voting systems for the city of San Antonio because it's a blue city. And it's taken them months to respond while the city's trying to update its voter rolls in a critical time when all these serious issues of, whether or not we're a real democracy are being raised.
So, JR, a blue city in a red state sounds familiar probably to people in a lot of parts of this country. It brings up the idea here in Wisconsin, which I always find interesting, is it's such a split state politically, and yet the people who end up getting elected statewide sometimes end up being far right or far left. They're not exactly centrists.
We are a state that has both Tammy Baldwin and Ron Johnson.
Right.
So that's not an understatement. We also are the state that had McCarthy, by the way, Gaylord Nelson. We definitely have split personalities in the election cycle. That's for sure.
Do people in the cities feel like there's a competition between the sort of more rural areas of the state and the cities, or do they feel like they're being represented?
That's a good question. Wisconsin's a unique place to me. I talk to operatives a lot, and they talk about there are Democrats in rural Wisconsin who don't realize they're Republicans just yet. They're ancestral Democrats, kind of blue-collar type folks who they were raised as Democrats and realize that culturally they're Republicans. They kind of sometimes are being pulled back and forth. To that realignment that's happened everywhere else has happened here in a big way. When I was first started covering politics, Wauwatosa, for example, it's a Milwaukee suburb, that was kind of a deep red city. That was Scott Walker, former governor. That was the seat he represents in the assembly. That's where he's from. It is now a overwhelming Democratic district.
Interesting.
And that's just in the span of 15 to 20 years. But it's that suburban thing where the high propensity voter, the college-educated voter is definitely a Democrat now, where it's a Republican 15, 20 years ago, which is why in off-year elections, the Democrats have an edge in Wisconsin because those voters who always turn out, they're now Democrats. When I was starting doing this years ago, presidential years, Democrats had the advantage because their blue-collar rural voter was kind of more Democratic, right? Now it's a Trump voter. And they come out when Trump's on the ballot. When he's not, they have to be motivated to come out.
Right. And we also haven't seen a situation where Trump's not on the ballot, but his party is on the ballot and the gas prices are as high as they are, as they are right now. Let's get to one more caller. Listen to this.
Hi, my name is Ellen. The chances of anybody slipping by are almost nil. When somebody's having a problem, trying to figure out how to use the machine, 2 election helpers one Republican and one Democrat to help answer their questions. So much is done to keep it clean.
That caller, by the way, called in from Wisconsin. You might have been able to tell from the accent there. But, somebody who again, believes that there are enough systems in place to make sure that people can trust that their vote will be counted, that things will be fair.
Yeah, we are the most decentralized system for voting in this country. So there is no one place, for example, that collects votes on election night other than the Associated Press and a couple of outlets like that. For government officials, nobody gathers everything election night. You have local governments who send their results to the counties, who post them on their website. The state collects them later on. We have 1,800 clerks in Wisconsin or something like that. Wow. They all kind of oversee their own election. So again, it's very decentralized. And most of the time, it's human error that we see causes issues or perceptions of issues. For example, in 2020, I was up until 3 a.m. waiting for Milwaukee County results, or city of Milwaukee results, in a primary. So I knew in 2020 in August, we're going to have a problem on election night. It's going to be 5 a.m. before the votes came in. And it was 5 a.m. Why? Because we had a huge surge in absentee ballots. It takes a long time to count. Milwaukee, the city of Milwaukee actually buys machines to open the ballot, the envelope, take out the ballot, and process it. It just takes so long to actually manually do these things. It just takes a long time. But anyway, when we see errors or perceived errors, a lot of times it's just human mistakes. I remember covering an election one time in 2011, Supreme Court race. They wrote down the wrong numbers. So on election night, we thought the Liberal candidate had won. 2 days later, the clerk went, oh, no, we made a mistake. And a news conference went, by the way, we flipped some numbers. It's actually this. It's swung the vote by 7,000 votes. It's hard to live that down, when this kind of stuff happens. But again, for the most part, our systems run well. I know Dominion voting machines, for example, are my favorite, target for the MAGA crowd. Donald Trump did better in 2020 in counties with Dominion machines than he did in 2016. So there's really a Dominion conspiracy against Trump. Why would he have done better in 2020 in the counties that only use Dominion machines in Wisconsin?
Right. Where do you spend election night if you've got all this information coming in from all? I mean, what do you look at to find out what's happening before everybody else knows?
So I'm in my office. I open a couple of clerk websites to make sure what's going on. The formula has changed a lot in Wisconsin of how to win statewide. Waukesha County, I know there's a joke about crucial Waukesha County across the country, but it is still important to see where things are at. If I open up the results there about 9 o'clock and the Republicans are below 62%, that's not a great sign, unless you're Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the only conservative/Republican I've covered in my entire career who could get 59% in Waukesha County and win statewide because he's created a new coalition up north. So this northern Wisconsin tier and kind of the western part of the state, he's found a way to drive turnout up there a way that he can do well. But anybody else below 62%, not great.
Yeah.
You look at Dane County, home of Madison. If the liberal is above 80% in Dane County and the conservative is below 62% in Waukesha, I kind of have a guess what's going to happen, barring that realignment up north that Trump drove. Now, Trump also in 2024 kept Harris below 80% in Dane County because he actually went to Dane County and campaigned there. That's actually kind of odd for Republicans.
Right. He was doing that a lot. I mean, he went and did an event in the Bronx. Like he was going into places. Was that just to drive down turnout? You think, looking back, is that the reason why he went to Dane County, was to try to get her numbers down
Republicans. There are actually a lot of Republicans in Dane County.
Yeah.
One of my favorite stats about Wisconsin is there are 3 counties that account for 44% of the primary vote in typical election. Milwaukee's obviously one of them. Dane County with Madison. The third is Waukesha. Even though it's a Republican county that votes 60-some% for Republicans, it's very populist. Dane County is the second-biggest county in the state. There are a lot of Republicans there. You go find the voters if you want to turn them out. And Trump, to his credit, engaged those voters in smaller towns in Dane County, got them to turn out election night.
All right, so JR, everybody who comes on this show gets to make a prediction about something. You don't necessarily know it's going to come true, but what do you think? What's your prediction?
I will hesitate to make predictions because you'll look foolish sometimes, especially after I saw the polling in 2016 and 2020. But I'll tell you this. When I talk to my sources, they have told me what's gas going to cost in October. If gas is $4.50 a gallon, Democrats in Wisconsin probably win a trifecta with the Assembly, the Senate, and the governor's office. And the reason is because if gas is that expensive, then Trump's numbers will be in the 30s. If Trump's in the 30s, that's a massive drag on the ticket for Republicans in general, hard to overcome. Now, the caveat always is candidate quality. Democrats have this wide open field, these 7 legitimate candidates running. If you get somebody who has got baggage or has a problematic nominee or whatever, that could pause the prediction about a good night for Democrats. But what is that baggage going to be? What could it be? What might the issue drive things? I don't know. I mean, I look back in past elections. If you had told me in May of 22 that Democrats have a good year, I'd have said, how? Then Dobbs came out, right? That drove everything.
Right.
In 2016 in September, I'm like, this is not looking good for Donald Trump after the whole, touch me here video, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, the emails came out. And, so things happen late that change everything. But, yeah, watch the gas prices and Trump's numbers in October in Wisconsin. They'll tell you a lot.
That is JR Ross, who's the editor of WisPolitics. JR, thank you very much.
Oh, thanks for having me.
And thanks to you for listening to The Follow-Up. It was produced by Harrison Patino. We'll be back in a couple days with our show from Wisconsin, from Kenosha, the Pritzker Military Museum and Library, all about mental health among active duty military and veterans. Tune in for that. I'm Jeremy Hobson. I'll talk to you soon.